The millionaire father, away on business, unexpectedly returned home on his daughter's birthday. But behind the door of the storage shed, tucked behind the lavish mansion, what he discovered left him frozen. Inside the old shed, the light barely flickered enough to reveal a stained cardboard box. On it sat a 7-year-old girl blowing out birthday candles, planted into a dry slice of bread. No birthday cake, no song. The girl bowed her head, eyes closed. Her lips moved with a wish that never made it to words. When the sound of footsteps echoed from outside, she flinched, her hands instinctively clenched. The door creaked open, silent. Victor Wells, 45, had just arrived at the mansion after 6 months of business in Europe. Years as a corporate executive had made him accustomed to sudden appearances, but this moment bore no resemblance to any meeting or situation he had ever encountered. Instead of heading through the main hall, he turned down the familiar side path leading to the shed. It was a discreet entrance he often used to avoid disturbing the staff when arriving unannounced. But the moment he stepped past the dark doorway, Victor stopped in his tracks. In the dusty room, meant only for old cleaning supplies and discarded boxes, his daughter sat upright on a rickety wooden chair. Candlelight danced across her cheeks, casting strange shadows. Not a sound, not a soul beside her. Maggie, 7 years old, throwing herself a birthday party. Alone. In front of her, on a bare porcelain plate, sat a single slice of dry sandwich bread. In the center, a pink birthday candle was stuck upright into the bread, its wax dripping slowly into a long, steady line. Victor froze. For 3 full seconds, he couldn't move. This was a $3 million mansion. It had hosted foreign dignitaries, catered parties with private chefs, French wine, live music, and his daughter was blowing out a candle on a piece of dry bread in the storage room. He stepped closer, voice low, unsteady. "What's going on here? Is this your birthday?" Maggie nodded, just slightly. She didn't lift her head. Victor leaned in, looked closely at the slice of bread, sitting atop a worn-out cardboard box. Beside it, a near-empty milk carton. No cup, no napkin, no spoon or fork. Just a tiny candle, still burning quietly. "You did this yourself?" The girl didn't answer. Suddenly, the sharp click of high heels echoed from the hallway leading into the main wing. Elena, his second wife, appeared, graceful in a beige silk dress, soft curls, pale red lips. Her eyes passed briefly over the makeshift table, not even a second. "You're home. I didn't expect you back this early." She smiled, as naturally as if everything were unfolding just as planned. Then glanced at Maggie. "The birthday party starts after dinner." She insisted on blowing out a candle first. "I was just about to come get you." Victor didn't take his eyes off his daughter. Maggie had bowed her head. Elena walked over, placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Sweetheart, Daddy's home. Aren't you happy?" Maggie gave a tiny nod. Victor stared at the candle. It had burned almost to the base, leaning crookedly should have been replaced long ago. Not a candle meant for a birthday celebration. "Where's the cake?" "In the fridge. I was going to bring it out after dinner." Elena picked up the piece of bread with 2 fingers, winced slightly, then tossed it into the trash can near the warehouse entrance. "This looks way too dry. Who let her eat this, sweetheart?" No one answered. Victor looked more closely. Maggie was thinner than he remembered. A few strands of hair had fallen loose, unbrushed. Her shirt was a little wrinkled, her eyes sunken. "How long have you been sitting here?" "Just a little while." "Where's Rosa?" Elena replied quickly. "She's hanging up the towels. I told her to take the rest of the day off so I could take care of everything. And hey." She gently touched his arm, offering a soft smile. "You're surprised, aren't you?" I've got everything ready, I just haven't had the chance to bring it out yet. You got here at the perfect time. Victor didn't respond. His eyes scanned the old storeroom. No cake, no balloons, no banner, or wrapped presents. Not a single sign that a party was about to happen. There was nothing, except the dry slice of bread that had just been thrown away, and a half-burned candle now snapped in two inside the trash bag. He stepped in slowly, sat down beside his daughter, and placed a gentle hand on her back. Come upstairs with Dad, okay? Maggie looked up. For a moment, her eyes lit up surprise, joy, and then worry. But she didn't say a word. She stood, took his hand. Victor led her up the steps, each footfall echoing like something long buried beginning to stir. Their shadows stretched across the wall, folding into the soft light. Below, the little candle still smoldered, lying quiet in the trash, beside an empty milk carton. But inside Victor, something had cracked. Not because of the bread, not because of the old candle, but because his daughter didn't react at all when the only thing that was hers on her birthday was taken away. Victor didn't yet know that today's door hadn't just opened to let him back in, but to force him to face everything he'd once looked away from. And this time, he couldn't keep his eyes shut. The next morning, Victor woke up early. The house was still quiet, with only the faint sound of young birds calling from afar. The sun had just cast its first light through the thin glass curtains. He sat up, no phone, no watch, only the lingering feeling from the night before still pressing against his chest. Victor stepped out of the room and walked down the second-floor hallway. At the far end, he stopped in front of a door with a small wooden nameplate. Maggie, handwritten, round lettering, in soft blue. He opened the door gently. The room lit up with the morning sunlight. There was a hint of lavender oil in the air. The bed was neatly made, the blankets smooth, the pillows aligned. The bookshelf stood in perfect order, stuffed animals, a box of crayons, everything, untouched and exactly in place, as if no one had laid a hand on them. Victor walked over to the bed and laid his hand on the pillow. Cold, untouched, no indent. No one had slept there last night. He leaned down and opened the nightstand drawer. Empty. No books, no hair clips, not a single personal item. He looked under the bed. Clean, no shoeboxes, no stray socks, no trace of a child growing up in this space. Everything. Too perfect. A kind of perfection, not meant for real living. As he turned around, at the other end of the hallway, Maggie was approaching, holding a glass of milk. She froze when she saw him, then stood still, her eyes distant, unreadable, neither happy nor sad. Victor spoke gently, his voice even. "Did you sleep here?" Maggie nodded, slightly, but her eyes didn't meet his. They quietly drifted past his shoulder, as if she were waiting. Then, a familiar voice rang out, doing a little inspection of the princess's room. Eleanor, Victor's second wife, appeared. She wore a beige robe, her hair neatly pinned up, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. She smiled, leaned down to kiss Maggie's forehead, then turned to Victor. Lately, she keeps wanting to sleep downstairs with Rosa. I've tried talking her out of it, but you know kids. I think it's just a phase. They change all the time. Victor said nothing. He simply glanced at the desk. A notebook lay in the center corners unbent, pencils arranged by color, all evenly sharpened. Not a mark on the paper. No eraser crumbs. No scribbles. This room didn't have Maggie in it. It had something else, something preserved for display. I still tidy it up every morning so she'll see everything neat and feel safe, stable, Elena continued, her voice as soft as a cool stream. Oh, and you should go check Rosa's room. I just painted that corner wall in the color Maggie picked. It's really cute. Victor looked at Maggie. She was still standing there, holding her cup of milk. That little nod earlier, he suddenly realized it hadn't been confirmation. It had been acceptance. After breakfast, while Eleanor stepped out into the garden to make a call, Victor detoured into the study. He sat down in front of the touchscreen security system. His eyes scanned the layout of the second floor. No camera in the hallway outside Maggie's room. None at the back stairs either. A total blind spot. Victor frowned and flipped through the installation contract. A small note at the bottom of the page made his chest tighten. Second floor exempt from equipment as per specific request of client, Mrs. Elena Wells. He sat frozen, staring at the words like a slap to the face. His daughter's room had no surveillance. He checked the cameras on the first floor. Kitchen, living room, hallway, all covered. The storage area and laundry room had just a single small camera placed in a corner, across from the entrance. Victor rewound the footage from early that morning, and there it was. Rosa, hunched over, opening the storage room door. A small figure followed Maggie. She was holding a throw pillow and a thin blanket, tiptoeing inside. Then both of them disappeared into the dark as the door closed quietly behind them. Victor leaned back in the chair. A slow, creeping cold spread through his chest, into every vein. His daughter had spent the night in the storage room, on a night her father was home. And that bedroom upstairs? It was just a staged set. Dinner began at 6:30. The kitchen was lit by soft, recessed lighting. Eleanor set the table herself. Napkins folded into triangles, a glass of wine for Victor, fruit juice for Maggie. The main course was French-style roasted chicken, served with multigrain bread and creamy corn soup. Victor sat at the head of the table. Eleanor took the seat across from him. Maggie sat next to her father. "This dish is from the cooking class I took at the Four Seasons," Eleanor said, placing her napkin on her lap. Victor nodded without comment. Maggie said nothing. Throughout the meal, Eleanor talked a lot about the new meditation course she had just signed up for, her friends at the golf club, and how she was thinking of inviting the school principal over to discuss Maggie's education. She spoke as if giving a presentation smooth, light, always smiling at just the right moments. But what caught Victor's attention wasn't what she said. It was that every time Maggie was about to speak, Eleanor would cut in. When Victor asked, "So, Maggie, what did you learn at home today?" Maggie started to answer, but Elena jumped in first. "She did some drawing, really cute ones. I hung one up in the hallway upstairs. You'll see it." Victor turned to look at his daughter. Maggie gave a small nod, but her lips didn't move. She twirled her spoon in her fingers, eyes lowered. Halfway through the meal, Maggie accidentally knocked over her glass. It fell onto the placemat, didn't break, but spilled across the table. The water ran up to the edge of her plate. Elena's expression changed for just a second. Her hand twitched, eyes flicked quickly, but then her face softened again. "Oh my, looks like Daddy's little princess is a bit clumsy today. It's okay, sweetie. Let Mommy clean it up." She stood, grabbed a towel, and wiped the table quick, neat, decisive. She said nothing more to Maggie. Maggie still didn't lift her head. Victor picked up the glass, set it upright again. The girl whispered, "I'm sorry." "It's all right. Just an accident," he said in a low voice. The meal ended with a serving of lemon mousse. Elena poured Victor another glass of wine and told Maggie to go brush her teeth. The girl obeyed and left the table. As she stood, her shirt shifted slightly. Victor noticed a red mark across her upper arm. Not long, but clear, like something had been yanked. "Maggie, wait," he spoke gently. "What happened to your arm?" The girl turned back, her arm now hidden behind her. She smiled faintly. "I got it caught in the door this morning." Elena stepped in, brushing Maggie's hair with her hand. That's right. She nearly shut it on her arm when closing the laundry room door. I already put some cream on it. It's nothing serious. Victor nodded, but his eyes followed his daughter's figure as she left the kitchen. When the sound of her footsteps faded on the stairs, he turned to Elena. The laundry room door that heavy? Elena poured the wine, her face unchanged. The back door. Looks like the hinge is loose. I'll have someone take a look. A reasonable answer. Clean. Sufficient. Not a word wasted. Victor smiled, but in his mind, a list had already begun to form. An old candle, a bedroom that looked like a showroom, no camera on the second floor. Now, a red mark with a smooth, almost cold explanation. That evening, after Eleanor went to bed early, Victor stayed downstairs. He made himself a cup of coffee, poured it into a ceramic mug, then sat down in front of the security system monitor. Kitchen, clear view. Living room, check. Back hallway, check. But when he rewound the footage from 5:30 to 6, the time they were getting ready for dinner, all he saw was Rosa setting the table, wiping down the counters. No sign of Elena in the kitchen. No footage of her pouring milk, cooking, cleaning, nothing. Victor remembered it clearly. Elena had said she made the chicken herself. He fast-forwarded to the dinner scene. There was sound, but no footage of Maggie dropping her glass. 10 more minutes ahead, there was Rosa again, cleaning up alone. Still no Elena. He looked closely. The kitchen camera had been turned, angled off in another direction. Then, later, it had been moved back. Victor sat still for a few minutes. Then, he picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and tapped a name. Jim Hartley. Jim's voice came on after 2 rings. Vic, if you're calling at this hour, you either need a drink or something serious is going on. Victor gave a faint smile. No drink. But I need to ask you something about the process for pulling home security footage as personal evidence. Jim paused for a beat. What's going on? I'm not sure. Maybe I'm reading too much into things. Maybe there's nothing wrong, it's just something feels off. Jim's tone shifted, more serious now. You think your daughter's okay? Victor was silent for 2 seconds. I've never seen her this quiet. After the call, Victor went upstairs. Elena was asleep. Maggie's room was dark. He gently opened the door. The room looked exactly as it had that morning. The pillow was untouched. The curtains hadn't moved. There was no sound of a child breathing. A memory flickered in his mind. Caroline, his ex-wife, holding baby Maggie, smiling softly. That woman had once said, "If one day I'm no longer around, make sure she feels like she truly belongs somewhere." Victor had tried to do that. But then Elena came, right when he was at his weakest. She was gentle, capable, seemed to care for Maggie. And so, he handed everything over. Now, he saw it clearly. Maggie didn't sleep here. She lived quietly, as if asking permission just to exist. Eleanor was perfect to the point of being cold. Victor stood in the doorway another minute, then turned away. In his mind, the same questions kept echoing. An old candle. A bedroom, like a showroom. No camera on the second floor. And his daughter was sleeping in the storage room. Who was really setting the rhythm of this house? And why? Was Maggie so quiet? It was a gloomy morning, with mist drifting across the back garden. Spring lay over the grand mansion like a quiet melancholy. Victor Wells walked slowly through the rear hallway. He wore no watch, no leather shoes, as he usually did. Barefoot, with his hands buried deep in the pockets of his slacks, his steps were soft, as if he didn't want to disturb anyone or anything. He paused by the laundry room, where a dim fluorescent light cast a dull glow over the old tile floor. Inside, Rosa, the Mexican housekeeper who had been with the Wells family for over 4 years, was carefully folding a white sheet. The light threw her shadow long across the ground. Victor stood silently for a moment, watching. The room smelled clean and looked neat, but there was something restrained about it, like a place where people had learned to be quiet for too long. At last, he spoke. "Rosa, have you eaten anything this morning?" She startled slightly. Turning around a little flustered, she said, "Yes, Mr. Wells, I had a bit of pastry." Victor gave a small nod. He stepped inside, leaned against the doorframe, eyes still fixed on her. "You're on the night shift, right? Maggie still comes down to your room sometimes." Rosa hesitated. She turned back to the sheet, continuing to fold it, though her hands weren't as steady as before. "Sometimes. She has trouble sleeping. I just sit with her a while." Victor said nothing, but his brow drew in slightly. He took a few more steps toward her, looking directly at her face. "Rosa, I checked Maggie's room last night. She didn't sleep there. The room looked untouched. The pillow was smooth, not a single crease out of place. You knew that, didn't you?" Rosa didn't answer, but her fingers clutched the sheet tightly. "I'm not here to blame anyone. I just need to know, was it Eleanor who stopped the girl from sleeping in her own room?" Rosa froze. That name seemed to paralyze her. After a moment, she gave a faint nod, eyes lowered. "I can't say much, Mr. Wells." "Because of Eleanor?" Again, she nodded, very slightly, but enough for him to know. Evening fell. The villa was as quiet as a model home on display. Rosa returned to her room, her steps unhurried. She locked the door, then knelt beside the bed, her only refuge of silence in this house, for as long as she could remember. Her aged hand pulled out an old wooden box. The corners were scuffed. The hinge let out a faint creak. Inside were a few wax crayon drawings, messy, childlike, but rich with feeling. One picture made her pause. Maggie had drawn herself standing next to a woman who resembled Rosa. Behind them loomed a large black mass with sharp teeth, as if it were crawling out from a half-open door. No title, no caption, just the panic in the girl's eyes, captured in trembling lines. Rosa gently gripped the edge of the paper. Her chest tightened. This wasn't some childish fantasy. It was a silent confession drawn by a child who wasn't allowed to speak. She put the picture back, slid the box into its place. That night, as she walked down the second-floor hallway, Rosa stopped short. Victor was standing at the far end. The wall sconce cast a light across half his face, calm but unreadable. "What have you been keeping under the bed?" His voice wasn't threatening. It was just a plain question from someone who had started to sense that something wasn't right. Rosa looked at him, her gaze steady. A moment passed. It's what the girl didn't dare keep in her own room. Mr. Wells Victor didn't press further. He just studied her for a long while, then quietly said, "I think it's time we stopped staying silent." Rosa lowered her eyes. Her voice came out soft, barely more than a breath. "I know, but please, give me one more night. I need to be ready." Victor nodded. He stepped back, letting her walk the path she needed to take. He understood. Those who live quietly in the dark often see the most. And now, they would be the ones to bring the light back in. Victor sat in front of the security control panel in the library, the glow from the screens casting a pale light across his tired cheeks. In front of him was a map of the entire camera system surrounding the house. But as he looked closer, he noticed something odd. Too many blind spots. As if someone had deliberately left gaps in the very home he lived in. He called in his private technician, Daniel Lowe, an old acquaintance from his military days, quiet and trustworthy. Daniel ran through the entire system in silence. When he finished, he frowned. "There's an automatic shut-off schedule every night from 8 to 10. Exactly the 2 cameras near Maggie's room and the staircase to the second floor." "Programmed intentionally?" Victor asked. Daniel nodded. Also, there's a weak signal jammer near the corner of the second-floor hallway. It keeps the video from saving at the right moment. Victor didn't respond. He leaned closer to the screen, his brows drawing together, piecing things together silently. That was the exact window of time when he usually FaceTimed during business trips to Chicago, San Francisco, sometimes New York. He'd always thought he was there with his daughter in the evenings. But on the screen, there was no sign of Maggie in her bedroom. Not once on any of those nights. Instead, he traced the footage from the auxiliary hallway camera, the grainy one people usually ignored, and there it was. At 9:12 p.m. the night before, Maggie quietly walked into the storage room with a pillow in her arms, the same place where he'd found her blowing out birthday candles. That night, after Eleanor had gone upstairs, Victor quietly headed down to the lower level. The house was so still, it felt like it was holding its breath. He made a cup of coffee, poured it into a ceramic mug, and instead of sitting in front of the control panel like the night before, he turned into the storage room, the place where he'd seen his daughter blowing out birthday candles on a slice of dry toast. The dim yellow light from the ceiling bulb cast his shadow against the unpainted brick wall. The room was unchanged, cardboard boxes, a broom leaning in the corner, a worn piece of cloth draped over a small chair. But this time, Victor didn't just stand there. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small device, no bigger than 2 finger joints, a tiny standalone camera, not connected to the main system. Only he and Daniel, his old tech from their time in Europe, knew about it. Victor crouched, carefully fastening the device to a wooden beam behind the fabric shelf, adjusting the angle to face the thin mattress where Maggie had once slept. This isn't a home, he thought. This is a stage. And my daughter's the only one who never got a script. As he stepped out of the storage room, he didn't look back. For 3 nights in a row, he silently replayed the footage. Night 1, quiet. Night 2, Rosa sat beside Maggie's bed, whispering a story. Night 3, 9:18 p.m. Elena walked in. Her face still wore light makeup. A thin silk nightgown clung to her frame. In her hand was a stack of colored papers. "What is this?" Eleanor's voice was cold. Maggie shrank back against the headboard, her voice no louder than the wind. I just drew the things I wished for." Eleanor glanced at the papers, then immediately grabbed Maggie by the wrist, yanking her forward. The drawings crumpled and tore with a sharp, ripping sound. "What did I say? No drawing people in this house. No drawing me like some kind of demon." She grabbed Maggie's shoulders and shook her. Maggie didn't cry. She only lowered her head, her whole body trembling like a string pulled too tight. "If you keep doing these little, silent cries for help, you'll find out what it's like to live without a soul to talk to. Got it?" Victor froze in front of the screen. He wanted to rush in, but the footage was from the past, and he was here, now, unmoving. Maggie only nodded. Her tears fell quietly, without a sound. A child who already knew silence was the only way to avoid more pain. Elena smiled as she dropped the torn drawing to the floor, a perfectly measured smile. Then she gently smoothed Maggie's hair, as if she just scolded a mischievous child out of love. After that, Elena stepped out just as the main camera shut off, exactly on schedule. Victor sat still. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was proof. His hand was clenched so tightly it had gone pale. His eyes were rimmed red. The image of Elena shoving Maggie, pressing the girl's shoulders down onto the bed with her fists, like pinning her in place, burned itself into his mind. From the beginning, he had noticed how skilled Elena was at handling situations. But now, he understood. It was a mask. Beneath that polished surface was cold-blooded control. No shouting, no bruises, but the hurt seeped in, day after day. And he, the father, had not been there. Victor stood up and walked to Rosa's room. He knocked gently. Maggie was sitting on the bed, clutching her old teddy bear. He sat beside her, silent for a moment. "Would you like to tell me the thing you haven't been able to say?" Maggie didn't look up. She just murmured softly, "I'm scared Mum Elena will find out. She said if I told you, you'd get mad and leave again." Victor froze. Then he leaned down and wrapped his arms around his daughter. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. No matter what you say, I'm staying." Maggie gripped his arm tightly. "Then, please don't make me stay quiet anymore. Don't leave me alone again. Okay, Dad?" Victor held her close. Deep inside, he knew this was the first time Maggie had truly spoken up. And he was truly listening for the first time. The next day, Victor sat again in the library, the bluish glow from the screen rising into the heavy, damp air. He rewound the footage recorded by the nightlight camera in Maggie's room. By the third viewing, Victor wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was staring down at his hands. The slight tremble in those aging hands betrayed the kind of truth that can't be seen without losing composure. On the video, Elena stood close to Maggie. Her voice was sweet as honey, but her eyes lit up with a dangerous glint. "You think you can smear me with this stupid little stunt?" Maggie backed away, her small hand still clutching the drawing tightly. Elena grabbed her wrist and yanked it free. Maggie's shoulders shook visibly. "You think I didn't notice? Who taught you to think I'm some kind of monster? Let me show you what a real nightmare feels like." She ripped the drawing apart and shoved it into the fireplace, even though there was no fire. Elena tilted her head slightly, her voice still soft, almost a whisper. "Remember this." "Stay quiet. No one's going to believe you anyway." Maggie didn't cry, but the way she couldn't bring herself to look up told Victor everything. His daughter was living in fear, with no way out. Then the video went on and revealed a scene Victor hadn't noticed before. The camera caught Elena dragging Maggie toward the bathroom. The sound of water came on, not the sound of a bath, but the hard spray of a cold shower. Elena growled, "Still being stubborn? Fine. Sleep in here then. Cold, isn't it? Then don't talk back next time." She slammed the door shut, leaving Maggie shivering and soaked inside. No comfort, not even a towel. Victor looked away from the screen. His breathing slowed, each breath pressing against his chest like a heavy stone. What stirred inside him was no longer just anger. It was a tangled weight of guilt, obsession, and a sorrow that came too late. He had once believed that providing and organizing a stable life was enough for a child who'd lost her mother. But now, seeing Maggie endure in silence, he realized he had vanished at the very moment his daughter needed him most. He was no longer simply a husband who had tried and failed. He was a father, now forced to face the truth that he had trusted the wrong person, and the price had been his daughter's childhood. That evening, Victor asked Rosa to meet him in the backyard. Under the soft yellow light of the patio lamp, he handed her a USB drive without saying a word. Rosa looked at him, then quietly took it. On the screen of the laptop, the video played. As Eleanor's voice echoed and the image of Maggie being dragged appeared, Rosa lowered her hand from her mouth, eyes welling with tears. "Please, please don't let this go on any longer." Victor placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice low but steady. "Is there anything else you're keeping, Rosa?" "Anything at all that can help me expose her." Rosa looked at him, hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Come with me." She led him down to the basement where sunlight never reached. The room was old and musty, with the smell of mildew, worn fabric, and peeling paint hanging in the air. In a shadowed corner, partly hidden by a dusty curtain, sat a crumpled cardboard box. Rosa knelt down and gently opened it. Inside were crayon drawings, some faded, others crumpled, as if they'd once been hidden away in fear. These are what the little one used to leave in my room. I never had the heart to throw them out. I thought, one day, they'd need to be seen. Victor bent down and lifted each drawing carefully. Each one captured a frozen moment. Maggie curled up inside a broom closet, drawn in nothing but black, grey, and purple. Another showed a door slammed shut, a grown-up figure behind it, arm raised with what looked like a belt. Rosa took a slow breath, then said softly, "She used to make the girl kneel in the storage room for hours, just for spilling water. One winter day, Maggie was wearing just a thin shirt and got punished, had to stand outside on the porch in the freezing wind. I tried to slip her a scarf through the window, but she wouldn't take it. She was scared Elena would find out. One time, I saw Elena hit the back of Maggie's hand with a metal spoon just because she wasn't eating fast enough. Another time, she locked Maggie in the laundry room all evening with no light. I wanted to tell you so many times. I wrote letters. I even brought evidence to the police station. But Elena found out. She threatened to report my sister for living illegally in California and said she'd make up a story about me stealing so I'd get fired. I was afraid, but not anymore." A tiny slip of paper made Victor freeze. The handwriting was childish. "Dad, if you're reading this, I still love you very much. But I'm scared. I don't want to be forgotten like I was never here." Victor felt a lump rise in his throat. He held the paper with both hands, as if gripping it too tightly might shatter the past beyond repair. Each clumsy, uneven letter was like a blow to his chest. He was a father, but for years, he had only been the man who sent gifts, made video calls, signed off on wire transfers. He once believed that as long as Elena said, "Everything's fine," he could safely stay focused on work. He had blindly placed his faith in clean reports, in the polished appearance of a woman he had never truly understood. This wasn't just evidence. This was a desperate cry for help, one that had gone unheard for so many long days and nights. He set both hands on the box, drew a long breath, then looked at Rosa. "From now on, we don't stay silent anymore." Rosa nodded. For the first time, her eyes no longer trembled. "I'll stand with you, with Maggie." Victor nodded back, but the look in his eyes wasn't just gratitude anymore. There was fire in them, something long, buried beneath years of work, political handshakes, and the quiet exhaustion of a man who lost his wife too soon. Now, he was no longer on the sidelines. He was a father, a witness, and the one who would end the days Maggie had to live in silence and fear. For the first time in years, he was truly doing the right thing, not out of duty, not to restore his name, but because he was furious. Furious at himself for not being there, and furious at the woman who stepped into that absence and crushed his daughter's childhood, not for reputation, not to silence guilt, but to protect what little light was left in the childhood of a girl who had known far too much darkness. The atmosphere inside the Wells estate had begun to shift. Ever since his conversation with Rosa, Victor no longer wandered aimlessly through the hallways. He had become both an observer and a man of action. Yet he still hadn't confronted Elena directly. Not because he lacked evidence, but because he knew her too well. She was a master manipulator, skilled at twisting facts to serve her advantage. Elena didn't lash out in anger. Her weapon was calculation, quiet, ruthless moves that left her victims questioning their own sanity. Victor understood that if he acted too soon, she'd change tactics in an instant, maybe pretend to be the victim, paint Maggie as a lying child, even turn the tables and sue him for false accusations in his own home. For years, he'd blindly handed Elena the keys to his daughter's life. He couldn't afford another mistake. He needed her to keep believing she was in control. Needed her to feel safe enough to slip. Early that morning, Victor poured himself a cup of black coffee and leaned against the glass window in the library, staring out at the garden still cloaked in mist. The dim light reflected his face, tired, calculating, but with something burning in his eyes. Resolve. He pulled out his phone and dialed Jim, the town's police chief, and an old college buddy. The phone rang 3 times before Jim picked up. "Victor, what's going on? Calling this early?" Victor didn't waste time. "Jim, I need to ask you something. Last year, did you get any reports about a child crying at my house?" The line on the other end fell silent for a beat. A pause stretched out for a few seconds. Finally, Jim responded, slowly. "Yes." It was an anonymous call, just past midnight. The caller said they heard a baby crying non-stop from your house. There were also sounds like things crashing or being slammed against the wall. Victor tightened his grip on the coffee cup in his hand. The heat pressed into his palm, but it was nothing compared to the cold fury spreading through his chest. "And you went over?" "I personally went with Officer McTavish." Elena answered the door. She was calm, smiling, invited us in, said Maggie had a mild cold, wasn't sleeping well. Then she pulled up security footage from the living room and kitchen. Everything looked quiet. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Jim hesitated, then added, "I remember..." Maggie didn't appear in the footage, but Eleanor said she was asleep upstairs, didn't want to disturb her. At the time, I didn't question it. She was too confident, too composed. She looked like the perfect mother in the middle of the night. Victor let out a long, heavy sigh. His voice dropped. That night, Maggie was locked in the storage room for 5 hours. No electricity, no blanket. I just reviewed footage from the hidden camera inside the night lamp. It shows Elena dragging her into the room, locking the door from the outside. She edited the footage before showing it to you. Jim went silent. On the other end, there was a faint click, maybe him getting up from his desk. Damn it. If that's true, we missed a clear warning. I should have looked harder. Don't blame yourself, Jim. I used to trust her completely. Elena didn't seem like the type to hurt anyone. She's subtle, the kind of person who makes the victim believe they're the one at fault. Jim exhaled quietly. Then his voice grew firm. "Send me everything you've got, the footage, records, statements. I'll reopen last year's report and go through the duty log too. If there's a crack in any of it, I'll stand with you. Not just because we're friends, but because of that little girl. She deserves to be protected." Victor simply said, "Thank you. I need someone who truly sees what's going on here." That evening, Rosa was invited to the library. At the same time, Lisa Daniels, a sharp young attorney known for her work in child protection cases, was also present. Victor had heard of Lisa from a television interview the previous year when she represented an 8-year-old girl who had been abused by both her stepfather and biological mother. Lisa wasn't the type of lawyer who wore stiff suits and recited legal codes coldly. She went straight to the heart of the pain and pulled the child out with empathy, with the law, and with an unwavering resolve. It had taken Victor a whole day to get in touch with her. When he said simply, "My daughter, I want to save her from that fear," Lisa replied, "I'll be there." Lisa documented every detail. She said only, "We're not going to let this continue." The action plan was clearly agreed upon between Victor, Lisa, and Rosa. 1. Temporarily and legally separate Maggie from Elena. Lisa proposed using a routine medical checkup as the pretext to get Maggie out of the house for a few hours, avoiding direct confrontation, but giving the child a temporary break from Elena's emotional influence. During that window, a psychologist and a legal representative would have the chance to speak with Maggie privately, assess her mental state, and collect testimony. Dusra, compile all evidence and report it. Victor and Rosa were responsible for gathering all documentation, unedited footage from the hidden camera, Rosa's detailed statement, drawings and notes Maggie had left behind, each piece contributing to a fuller picture of prolonged emotional abuse. Lisa would submit the complete file to Child Protective Services, CPS, as an emergency petition demanding immediate intervention. 3. Prepare for legal pushback. Eleanor wasn't the kind to back down easily. Lisa anticipated that she might hire a lawyer to countersue or try to cast herself as the victim. The team planned to coordinate with Jim the sheriff to verify previously buried reports and identify any falsified evidence. The goal, not only to remove Eleanor from Maggie's life, but to ensure she could never access or harm another child again. While Lisa worked with Rosa, Victor continued checking the home's electronic systems. He discovered several encrypted files. Some appeared to be audio recordings, Eleanor talking to someone about adjusting the story if questioned. The web of lies was no longer just a suspicion, it was organized. After the discreet meeting in the library, Lisa slipped out through the back. Victor returned to his office, while Rosa headed downstairs as she usually did. But today, she had a new task: to keep Maggie close by, longer than usual, as a first layer of protection against what was coming. Rosa knew that every plan needed time, but with Elena, a single glance could wipe away all traces if she felt threatened. So, Rosa kept Maggie near not just to delay, but as a quiet shield between the girl and danger, and to watch closely, to memorize every sign that something might be off. If Elena made a mistake, Rosa would be the first to see it. And this time, she was ready to hold on to the truth. Rosa led Maggie into the kitchen, where the soft yellow light fell gently over the stone countertop. The little girl tugged at Rosa's sleeve, asking in a whisper for a warm glass of milk before bedtime. Then Elena appeared, suddenly, at the end of the hallway. She said nothing, just looked at Rosa with eyes cold as a blade. Rosa froze. Maggie clung to her, frightened too. No threats were needed. Elena already knew something was wrong. But this time, Rosa didn't lower her eyes. She simply placed a hand on Maggie's shoulder, a silent declaration that she would not turn away again. Elena was no longer as composed as before. Though no one said anything outright, she had begun to sense a change in the house. The furtive glances from Rosa, Maggie's silence, the look in Victor's eyes no longer fully trusting. And more than anything, the creeping feeling of losing control, something Eleanor despised, was beginning to seep into every corner. That evening, after Victor left the villa for a meeting with a business partner in the next town, Eleanor sprang into action. She called a child psychological rehabilitation center and reported that Maggie had been showing signs of delusion, often talking to herself and drawing violent, dangerous images. She requested an emergency intake, hoping to have the girl removed from the house within 48 hours. Rosa happened to overhear the call as she walked past the hallway. She immediately turned back to her room to find her phone and contact Victor. But the signal in the servants' quarters had suddenly gone spotty. She managed only a brief call, leaving a voicemail of barely 15 seconds before the line went dead. Meanwhile, Eleanor called Maggie upstairs. With a gentle voice, she led the girl into the room and shut the door behind them. The click of the lock was firm. This time, there were no explanations, no scolding, just a cold stare and a curt sentence. "You won't be coming down for dinner tonight. Stay in here." Rosa heard the door bolt. She couldn't wait any longer. She grabbed the emergency key set she always kept hidden in the bottom drawer and rushed to Maggie's room. Her hands trembled as she fit the key into the lock, but with firm resolve, she turned it and opened the door. Maggie sat curled up in the corner of the room, eyes wide open. When she saw Rosa, the child didn't say a word. She just grabbed the woman's hand tightly. Without needing an explanation, Rosa pulled her along, heading out through the back door, the same one the repairmen used. A light drizzle was falling. Rosa wrapped a scarf around Maggie, covering her face, and hurried off toward Jim's house. At the same time, Eleanor noticed the door had been opened. She screamed and ran down the hallway, shouting Rosa's name. When she realized they were gone, she tore through the storage room, the kitchen, the library. Then she called the police, her voice frantic. "Someone kidnapped my daughter. One of the housemaids. Her name is Rosa." But by the time the police arrived, Jim's front door was already open. Maggie was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a warm blanket, with Rosa by her side. Jim, in plain clothes and still holding a cup of coffee, opened the door for the officers and said calmly, "The child has not been kidnapped. She's here with the consent of her legal guardian, her biological father, and I personally witnessed her being brought here. Everything was done within the law." Elena froze in the middle of the yard. Her face had gone pale, her eyes no longer able to focus. The rage she had bottled up for too long broke loose in silence and in despair. Victor arrived not long after. As he stepped inside, his eyes swept the living room and landed on the image of Maggie curled up beside Rosa, her small hands still clutching the woman's arm as if unwilling to let go. Maggie saw him. For a moment, father and daughter stood still, as if holding back something that had long been buried. Then Victor opened his arms. Maggie ran to him and threw herself into his embrace without saying a word. He held her tight, his hands trembling slightly. Victor didn't blame Rosa. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with emotion, part gratitude, part sorrow, part the ache of wondering how it had all gone so far. He looked at her and said quietly, "Thank you for your courage today." Rosa nodded silently, but this time she didn't bow her head. 3 days later, the Wells residence stood silent, as if abandoned. Eleanor had been taken into custody for investigative purposes. Child Protective Services, CPS, had taken over the case and issued an order to remove Maggie from a potentially dangerous living environment. She was now being safely cared for at the home of Jim, the chief of police and Victor's closest friend. Lisa Daniels, without taking a single day off over the past 3 days, had completed a full litigation file, including footage from the nightlight camera, Rosa's testimony, Maggie's drawings and notes, and medical records detailing her psychological trauma. She also submitted an emergency request to the court for a guardianship hearing. Local media quickly picked up the story, spreading it like wildfire. The dark side behind the white stone wall, millionaire Victor Wells, and the truth about Maggie. Public outrage followed. Parents who had once seen Eleanor at school functions began speaking up. She always came alone, never once let Maggie join in. On the day of the hearing, Victor wore a grey suit, but the distant look in his eyes was gone. He walked into the courtroom alongside Lisa, glancing toward the observation room where Maggie sat with a child psychologist, watching the proceedings through a monitor. He lifted his hand in a gentle wave. The child saw him, pressed her lips together, then gave a faint nod. Elena entered wearing a fitted black dress, her flawless makeup unable to hide the redness and dark circles around her eyes. Her attorney began with a familiar argument. "My client is a strict but responsible stepmother. The evidence presented is fabricated and lacks context. Maggie suffers from delusions, influenced by external factors. My client herself was a victim of childhood trauma and is currently experiencing psychological distress." Lisa stood up, her words slow and clear. "Your Honor, this is not a judgment based on emotion. Everything here is a sequence of events backed by evidence timelines that match repeated behavior, a victim whose account has remained consistent, locking a child away, threats, emotional manipulation, total control, and isolation from loved ones. This isn't discipline. It's prolonged psychological abuse." Rosa was called to the stand. She wore a light grey blouse, her hair neatly tied back, her hands clenched, but her voice stayed calm. "I used to hear Maggie crying in the storage room. There was a time she had to eat dry bread for 3 days as punishment for not eating with the others. Elena made her call her mistress mom and constantly told her that no one loved her, not even her own father. During cross-examination, Elena stood and pushed back, her voice shaky, but still trying to sound composed. "I only raised her the way I was raised. When I was Maggie's age, my mother locked me in the basement for saying the wrong thing. She told me, 'Children don't get to make demands. Children don't get to be weak.' And I survived. I learned to be silent. I learned to obey." She turned to the judge, her eyes suddenly darkening. "Maggie is a selfish child. She doesn't listen. She makes things up, imagines things. And Rosa, she's just a disgruntled employee. They're making this up to destroy me." Lisa didn't respond. She simply brought up Maggie's latest drawing on the screen. In it, the little girl had drawn herself and Victor holding hands beneath a blue sky, standing in front of a small house. No more shadows, no more fangs. Victor asked to speak. "My name is Victor Wells. I'm not the victim here. I'm the father who's been absent far too long. I used to think money, a house, and someone to look after her would be enough for a child. But my daughter didn't need a provider. She needed someone to listen, someone to believe in her, someone to protect her. I can't go back and fix what's done, but from today on, I will walk beside her, one step at a time." In the waiting room, Maggie sat watching the TV. When she heard those words, she leaned her head on the psychologist's shoulder and whispered, "Daddy's not leaving me alone anymore." The court ordered Elena to be held in custody pending further investigation. Temporary custody was granted to Victor. Lisa Daniels was appointed as Maggie's legal representative and psychological supervisor for the next 6 months. That evening, Victor visited his daughter at the treatment center. Maggie was painting. When he walked in, she paused, looked at him for a long moment, then asked, "Are you leaving again, Dad?" Victor stopped in his tracks, then knelt down in front of her. "Number, I'm afraid of losing you. I'm not going anywhere anymore." Maggie threw her arms around him. The tears that fell weren't from pain, but from relief. In that moment, no court ruling was needed. Justice had already begun through the courage it takes for a person to face their mistakes and make them right. The findings from the subsequent investigation confirmed that Eleanor had subjected Maggie to severe psychological abuse over a continuous period of 14 months. This included confinement, threats, restrictions, and the deliberate creation of a systematically fear-inducing environment. The initial motive was found to be jealousy toward the child, who carried the bloodline of Victor's ex-wife. Eleanor believed Maggie stood in the way of solidifying her own place in the family. Before being transferred to the temporary detention facility, Elena was granted a brief meeting with Victor in the guard room. It was a short encounter, but in the thick silence, one final mask fell away. Elena sat across from him, back straight, but her hand clutched lightly at the edge of her blouse. Her eyes fixed on Victor, sharp as ice, yet weary beneath the surface. "You think you won, don't you? But you weren't there, Victor. Not when Maggie had a fever in the middle of the night. Not when she screamed from nightmares. I was the one who held her, soothed her to sleep, wiped her forehead. And you? You showed up on video for 3 minutes and then hung up." Victor stayed silent. A slow, burning anger rose to his throat. He leaned on the table, voice low and tight. "And that gives you the right to make her afraid of her own bed. You threatened her, locked her in, made her too scared to draw, too scared to speak." "I know I was wrong, Elena. I was absent. I ran from the pain. But no one has the right to turn their own pain into a whip for a child." Elena let out a bitter laugh, but the sharpness in her gaze had dulled. What remained was bitterness. "She's not my child. She's the shadow of a woman you never forgot. That woman's dead, but she's still right there between us every time you look at that girl. I just wanted a life of my own, a life where I wasn't compared to someone else. And Maggie, she's in the way of all of that." Victor's hands curled into fists, but instead of arguing, he looked at her long and hard. "I used to think you were cold. Now I see. You were someone who got left behind, someone who was taught that love means punishment, and that silence keeps you safe. But Elena, Maggie is not the little girl you once were, and I won't let her grow up haunted by the same fear you carry." Elena lowered her face. Her shoulders trembled slightly, but she didn't cry. Victor stood. His voice was steady, but resolute. "I've missed too much already. But starting now, even if I have to learn everything from the beginning, I'll be the father Maggie can count on. You can hate me all you want, but I won't let anyone else's hatred steal one more day of my daughter's childhood." He left the room without looking back. Elena remained alone in the pale white light of the room. For the first time, there was no one left to blame, and no one left who believed her anymore. 3 months later, Maggie was living with Victor in a small apartment near Forest Hill Park. It wasn't as grand as the old mansion, but here Maggie could run and play in the park, wake him up early in the morning, and watch Rosa baking in the kitchen every day. Victor had completely left his business career behind. He started a small foundation to support abused children, a place where both he and Rosa volunteered. Every week, they visited a community center to read books, paint pictures, and listen to children who had been through what Maggie had once endured. At home, Maggie had a real bedroom of her own. The walls were covered with colorful drawings of all shapes and sizes. One stood out. 2 people, one old, one young, standing under the shade of a tree. In the distance, a large house faded into the mist, slowly disappearing. Victor was learning how to bake. For the first time in his life, he decided to throw a proper birthday party for Maggie, not to make up for anything, but to start anew. He made a guest list, prepared balloons, handwrote invitations, and picked a song Maggie used to love when she was little. But the most important thing was the birthday cake he wanted to bake himself, even though he had never stepped foot in a kitchen before. After each day working at the foundation, he'd head into the kitchen, put on an apron, and practice measuring flour, sugar, and eggs. Every failed cake taught him something about patience and about how real love doesn't come from providing, but from truly being there. The birthday came. Maggie had just turned 8. The small party was held in the living room. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm. Rosa prepared fruit and snacks. A few little friends from the center stopped by with their mothers. Lisa Daniels sent a pink bicycle, the one Maggie had mentioned, when asked, "What would you wish for if you could have one small wish?" Her therapist sent a handwritten note. "Today, you've come a long way from the nightmare. Happy first real birthday, Maggie." The cake sat in the middle of the table, white frosting, decorated with fresh strawberries and a few sprigs of mint. On top, Rosa gently placed an old candle, the same one that had once stood on a slice of dry bread the year before. Maggie stared at the candle for a long time. Her eyes were no longer filled with fear. They were calm now. When Victor placed a hand gently on her shoulder, he asked, "Are you ready?" She nodded. The candle was lit, and this time Maggie made a silent wish before blowing it out. The flame faded, not as a farewell to sorrow, but as a sign that a new chapter had begun. Rosa placed her hand on Maggie's back. "You've grown up, and now you get to live the life you were meant to live." Maggie didn't say anything, but she stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around Victor. After the party, Maggie stepped out onto the balcony. The evening breeze played softly through her hair. Down in the yard, her new bicycle stood waiting under the shade of a tree. She sat down on the wooden step, eyes lifted toward the amber sky. A gentle smile appeared. There were no more shadows behind her, only light. And a new door had opened, truly opened. Maggie's story isn't just about a child who was saved. It's about a father who had the courage to admit he was wrong, about a housekeeper who bravely overcame her fear, and about a community that came together to protect a single, fragile life. Sometimes, justice doesn't come from a courtroom, it comes from real change in the human heart. A hug, a small candle, or a birthday cake can be the beginning of an entirely new life. And what about you? In your own life, have you ever been a Victor, a Rosa, or a Maggie trying to find your voice in the dark? Please share your thoughts after hearing this story. What moved you the most? Or if you've ever witnessed or gone through something similar, would you like to talk about it? More importantly, are you okay? How has life been for you lately? Let me know if you'd like to talk, because you're not just an audience member. You're part of this journey. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Tonight, remember to drink some warm water before bed. You deserve to be cared for, fully and deeply.